Hello everybody and thank you for joining me. This is Ciara from Ciara T Designs and today I have this fun floral shaker card to share with you. So let's jump right in. So to start, I am going to create the panel that I want to blend on. So I brought out my Waffle Flower A2 lacy layer dies and I'm just going to cut the largest deckled, I guess it's scalloped edge die out of some HammerMill cardstock because this is the piece that I want to ink blend on to create that frame. Now, if you own a frame, you could do it a little bit easier way than what I'm going to do here, but I don't actually own any frame dies, so that gave me kind of what I was looking for. And then I'm going to blend on 5 different colors of Oxide ink. I started out with Kitsch Flamingo, then I used Squeezed Lemonade, Twisted Citron, Tumbled Glass, and Milled Lavender. I kind of really wanted a spring vibe in the colors that I chose, so I kind of went for lighter colors. And I am going to cut this, as you guys can see in the picture when we started this video. I'm going to create a frame to make my shaker window with, but I'm going to keep the centerpiece because I love how this turned out. I love ink blending. If you guys have been with me for a while, you know that that's kind of like my tried and true technique. I kind of go back to it anytime that I'm struggling to come up with an idea or I just haven't done it in a while, and I just kind of love how it looks. So though this is kind of like a weird blend of colors here, that's going to be irrelevant when I cut the frame because you're not going to see it all together anyway. So it'll look really pretty. And I did bring in some perfect pearls that I have mixed up in a little mini mister bottle. It's almost empty, and I have had some questions about how much I mix. So if you guys would like to see that, let me know, and I could do a new mix like just in one of my videos next time I go to use it. And maybe that would help. If you guys think that'd be beneficial, let me know. Leave me a comment telling me that. And then I'm going to bring in the Floral Trims stamp. This is a Tim Holtz stamp and a Stampers Anonymous. And I stamped that in Memento Tuxedo Black ink because that is a Copic safe ink, an alcohol ink marker safe ink. So I did specifically use that ink for that purpose. And then I really just wanted to add some shadows to the center of these flowers. So I only brought in 3 colors of my Copic markers. I'm going to use an N1, an N3, and an N5, and that's neutral gray. And that is to create the kind of shadowing effect in the center of the flowers to give them some depth. Otherwise, I feel like they would have been a bit flatter than I would like them to be. So I mean, there are many ways to do this. This is my preferred way to add some dimension to the design. So this is kind of what I chose to do. But I mean, you could leave them the way that they are if you didn't want to do this. I think the card would still turn out really pretty. I like to add dimension, and I haven't used my Copics in a while, so it was kind of fun to bust them out for a technique as well. So you can see I'm just doing flicks of color. I started with my lightest color. I like to go lightest to darkest and then back to lightest. I find I get the best control and the best blend that way. So that's kind of my preferred. So I went in first with the N1, then the N3. Now I finished up with the N5, and then I'm going to go back through. So I bring back my N3 to blend out my N5, and then I finish off with the N1 again, just to give it a really nice overall blend. And I'm going to do that to the 3 main blooms in this stamp. I'm only going to show you on this one. And you'll see it better here at the end, of course, but this is a sticky wicket, this one. Memento Tuxedo Black isn't as black as I would like it to be. And I find that when you put Copics over top of it, it fades a little bit. So I opted to stamp my image again in Versafine Onyx black ink because that is a very black ink. However, you can misstamp when you do this. So be very careful if you want to do this. I have misstamped. I've done it several times. It happens to me more often than not, and I should probably stop trying to restamp it, but it worked out pretty well in this. I had a slight misstamp in the one flower, but it's really difficult to see, so I'm not even concerned. So I just kept going forward. And this part, I really wanted to bring in the center of the flowers again, the stamen. So I brought in my white gel pen and I just kind of dotted it along where the little stamen were. Because I went over them with my Copic markers, they ended up quite dark and you couldn't really see them anymore. So that just brought a little bit of white back into that design. And then this is where I'm going to create my frame. So I brought in the next size of die in this set. And I've been flipping my dies over to make sure that they cut all the way through. Once in a while with the Magic Mat, I find that they don't cut all the way through, so I like to be kind of careful. And I did use the Simon Says Stamp very, very low tack tape to hold this die in place because there is so much ink and stuff on the panel. I really didn't want any of it to lift or rip off. So I was trying to be really careful with what tape I used. And then I decided that I was going to use the centerpiece of this in the inside of the card. So I stamped down the image again on that little panel kind of off to the side so that I have room to write. And then that's what I'm going to put on the inside of the card. And then here I'm going to fussy cut this out. I know some people don't enjoy fussy cutting, and that's totally fair. You could use a die set of a floral that you have that has a stamp set of a floral that you have that has a matching die, and then you wouldn't have to do this. However, because I just got this stamp set and because I love florals, I really, really wanted to use it for this card design. So I did have to kind of work my way around the flowers. And again, I'm only going to use the 3 big blooms and then some of the leaves in the background. I chose to cut off a lot of the other pieces of this. And you can see here I paused because I wasn't sure if I wanted to leave that stem with the leaves on it or not. I chose not to because the stems are so delicate that I didn't want to fussy cut around them. That's just because I was too lazy to do it. You absolutely can if you want to, or alternative, like I said, use a floral that has a matching die set, and then you wouldn't need to do this. But because I was cutting pieces of it off, I couldn't leave my white border that I usually like to leave because you'd be able to tell that there was lines going in random places that they no longer were there. So I did have to be kind of careful with that thought. Although I did leave all of these leaves, and I am going to bring in my craft knife here in a second to cut on the inside of that because I just couldn't leave it alone. And I'm going to have to set this down for a second because my cats were fighting. So I had to film this in 2 clips and go and separate my cats. But I think it turned out quite pretty. I love this card. The only thing is that I feel it's missing its sentiment, and I couldn't decide. I set out all these stamp sets and I'm like, should it be a thanks card? Should it be a happy birthday card? Should it be just like a supportive card? Should it, I couldn't decide what I wanted it to be. So in the end, I decided not to give it a sentiment for now. I will add a sentiment when I know who it's going to and for what purpose. But I feel like the design isn't quite finished because I didn't add that sentiment. I don't know why I feel that way. I mean, sometimes I don't add sentiments to cards and that's fine. But in this one, I just kind of feel like it's missing a little bit. So hopefully you guys think that it looks okay. I feel like the sentiment is missing. And I would probably do like a little banner die or a strip sentiment, like a thin strip sentiment. And I would just put it with the leaves, like I would kind of tuck it with the leaves and have it be a part of the design. That's what I would do. So if you're recreating this and you're like, hey, Ciara, where would you put the sentiment now that you haven't done that? That is where I would put it. It just happens that I could not decide what I wanted the sentiment to be. And you guys, I pulled out like a bunch of stamp sets that I own with different sentiments that I thought that would work. And I had them laying there. And then I asked my husband and he's like, it looks fine without it. And I'm like, but it needs a sentiment. And he's like, no, it's fine. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll leave it then because I don't know what it wants to be. And I don't want to put a sentiment on it and then be sad that I put a sentiment on it because it wasn't what I wanted it to, who I wanted it to go to. So that is why it is sentimentless, but it will eventually have one. Anyway, so I finished fussy cutting and you saw me bring out my craft knife and I cut the little pieces between the leaves out. And you don't have to do that. It's just that it felt necessary because I'm cutting along the line and I didn't leave any white space on this design. But so that's why I ended up doing it. And then I just brought in a Copic Multi-liner and I'm using that from the back side to just go over all of the areas that I've cut because that will make it look black and then it'll look like it was an intentional cut in case I miscut anything. And then it just kind of cleans it up and gives it a nicer look. And this is where I'm going to start making my shaker panel. So I brought in a piece of acetate. This has like a backer on it. That's just how my acetate comes. This is some of my preferred acetate. You can heat emboss and stuff on this acetate. But anyway, so I cut that down to be the size I needed it to be behind my frame. And then I'm going to lay, this is 3mm score tape. I think that's 1/8 in inches. and I'm going to cover the back of my frame with it because I think this is the easiest way for me to adhere acetate. Generally, if you guys have been with me for a bit, you know that I prefer liquid glue. It is my vastly preferenced glue because it gives me time to shift things around as I lay them down. But glue with acetate, I find that it slips, which I mean, I know it's its purpose, but I don't like that. And it can ooze out and then it sits on the acetate and I don't really like that look. So I did opt for a very thin piece of score tape to do this part where I could adhere my acetate to the frame. I haven't made, I'm going to say a traditional shaker card just because there's foam tape involved. I haven't made a shaker card in a while, especially a traditional one. I think the last one I made was like when I did my 5 cards, 1 kit Christmas video a while back. I did like a traditional shaker card. I have a tendency towards flat shaker cards because they're way easier in my opinion. But since I've only ever made, this is my second in my card creating days, I thought that it was fitting that I actually tried my hand at a more traditional style shaker card. Just because I think that they're stunning, ultimately. And I love interactive pieces. Like, I just think that's so fun. It gives you like a beautiful card as well as something you can do with it. So I just think it's a lot of fun. And then I decided I needed something in the background, but I really needed it to not steal the show. So I pulled this piece of pattern paper. I'm not even 100% sure where this came from. It's just some beautiful scripted writing on a piece of pattern paper. And I'm going to use that in the background behind my shaker elements so that there's some texture and interest there, but it's not something that's you're focusing on. Like, I want the main focus to either be, depending on who you are, I either want it to be the flowers because they're like white and black, or alternatively the rainbow kind of colored frame, right? I don't want it to be the texture in the background, but I want there to be texture in the background so that you can see that there's some interest in something going on there, but it's not really what you're focusing on. And then here you can see I just adhered that colorful panel on the inside of my card. So that's where I would write on this card when I send it to whomever is going to receive it. And then I just kind of adhered the front panel down. And I'm going to use Darice foam strips on my frame. I honestly don't think Darice makes these anymore, which is just tragic because I love these foam strips. But I don't think they make them anymore. So there are alternatives. I know other companies make foam strips, and I'll have like alternatives listed in the description below because I always list all of my supplies in case you're ever interested in what I'm using. And I'm sorry I go out of the frame here. I have to have all of my foam line up perfectly or the glitter will fall out. So I kind of adhere it and then I will lift it up close to my face to make sure that it is everything's touching, nothing's got a gap in it so that the glitter would just all fall out. So that's why I keep going out of frame every time I lay a piece of the foam down. But you can, like, there are foam strips out on the market, or alternatively you can use like a roll of foam. You just double it up and then cut it yourself. But I have these, and this frame is quite thin that I felt like this were kind of the best option for this, for what I was doing. But I mean, there's multiple ways to make a shaker card. So, and then I decided to fill the inside of my card. It's going to have, it had 3 scoops of the mica flakes and then 3 scoops of the rock candy glitter. I chose these ones because they're really subtle, but very pretty. And then of course I put the lids on right away because cats love to jump on my desk and I'd rather not have the whole container spill. Luckily nobody did, so it didn't matter, but it has happened. So now I'm really leery when I bust out the glitter because it would just be everywhere. And then, of course, I'm going to lift off carefully the pieces of foam tape or foam strips. Luckily for me, I didn't press this all the way down the first time I laid it because it's not straight. So I was really, really careful. You're going to see me. I'm going to lay it and then I'm going to lift it up again. Very, very, very carefully because you can see it's way further to the left-hand side than the right-hand side. It's not centered. And luckily for me, I was really able to gently lift this up without shifting the base so the glitter went everywhere. And then I could just gently nudge it over more to the left-hand side so that it was centered. Hopefully it's pretty centered. I mean, I didn't measure it or anything, but it looks really centered to me now. So I'm pretty happy about that. And then I did press each area of the foam to make sure that it was really well adhered. And then I had to shake it because why not? And then because I can't ever figure out when I should stop, I had to bring in my clear glitter pen and I just went over all of the petals of the flowers just to give them a little more something. Very, very subtle. You can't really see it. It's a very subtle shimmer pen, but it just gives it something a little bit extra. And I love that. I mean, this is a very, very sparkly card. It's got all the shiny things, but I personally, I guess I'm kind of like a magpie. Like, I love shiny things. They just make me so happy. And I love, like, receiving stuff that has glitter adhered to things. I'm not so fond of it when people do those like surprise glitter things and they fall out all over the place. I don't like that. But I love shiny things on my cards and my whatnot. So, and then here I'm just adhering the floral the way I want it. I'm actually adhering the petals and whatnot that's sitting on top of the frame, though I did go back in later and I added a little bit of double-sided tape behind the one leaf that's in the center of the shaker panel, just to make sure it would stay there, because I didn't want this to like go in the envelope and then have it lift off, because there wasn't a lot of things keeping it there. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. So I did end up, that petal right there in the center, I did end up putting a little piece of double-sided adhesive behind it. And then because, it wasn't glittery enough quite yet, I did go in with some self-adhesive opal gems from Spellbinders. I'm kind of loving these for if you want a little bit subtle glitter. You guys know I love the pearls. I love the pearls, but they're just too big, and I didn't want that to then be the focus. So these really small, because these adhesive gems come in 4 sizes on this little sheet, and you get a fair amount of them. And I used 1 of the second smallest size and then 2 of the smallest size in each center of the flower, which you're going to see here in a second, because I'm going to hold it up so you can check it out in all its glory. So hopefully you guys like how this card turned out. As I said, I didn't add a sentiment. I will when I go to figure out what I'm going to send it to, but for now, it is sentimentless, and I think that it turned out really pretty. And I love the shaker element. I don't know why I don't do those more often, because they're just really fun, and they add such a whimsy to a card. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Leave me a like, leave me a comment, and consider subscribing if you haven't already. I do new videos every Monday and Thursday. Thank you so much, guys, and I will see you again very soon. Bye-bye for now.